amateurs will find any excuse in the world to not prospect. I mean, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The eclipse is happening right now, and there's people that are saying, "Hey, I'm not going to prospect because I'm going to watch the eclipse." Or people say, "Oh, well, the big game was last night, and I stayed up too late, so I'm not going to watch. I'm not going to prospect today." I bet you I have said the prospect qualification method to my rearview mirror more times than I have said it to human beings.
There's just a few basic principles every single one of us should be following, in my opinion, every day. I know what mine are. I'm pretty sure we're going to be pretty close to being aligned, but
I went to the very first sales class I went to was called The Great Escape, and it was about escaping mediocrity, not being a C player.
Everybody's talking about the hard market, and they're griping and moaning about their remarkets, reshops, renewals, whatever you want to call them. Like that's a plague. Well, thank God. I mean, if you don't want to do them, feel free to send them my way. I'll remarket them for you.
Look, we're going to focus 100% on the clients. And I think while everybody else, or a lot of other people were focused on making this 5 minutes more efficient or 2 keystrokes more efficient or automating this email or automating that email.
People out there that are giving you the message that you need to work harder than everybody else and put more time in than everybody else. And the reality is, no, you don't. You just need to know how to work smart, and you need to work smart on the things that you can control and that you're really, really good at.
And if I could encourage people to do one thing, is that they could realize that this stuff is important, but it is not the most important thing ever.
Yeah, insurance is fine, and we certainly want to be able to place that. In fact, we view the insurance is the funding mechanism for you to be able to purchase what we talked about in terms of all these services that you're not getting. We're showing you how to take money you're already spending to get something you don't have. I view my business as the funding mechanism for me to live my life the right way. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast. You're in for a treat today because we are going to be dropping what I like to call Gurley Gold. And we're going to do it for as long as my man's going to stay on. But we were talking over the weekend, and it was funny. Josh reached out to me and said, I probably need to come on the podcast again sometime soon and talk about this subject. And it was exactly this. I literally was thinking, I need to get Gurley back on the podcast and talk about getting back to the basics. We have so much freaking noise out there right now that I think people are missing the point. And the point is, this ain't a difficult industry if you just stick to the basic things that led you to success to begin with. And I mean, I could give you a million different examples, and we're guilty. The podcast is guilty of contributing to it because we feature people that are from insurtechs and from different AI companies and all of that. But at the end of the day, there's just a few basic principles every single one of us should be following, in my opinion, every day. I know what mine are. I'm pretty sure we're going to be pretty close to being aligned, but want to bring Gurley back on to talk about it. So what's up, man?
Well, it's good to be back, first of all. Second of all, we took our family to Disney World last week, and we just missed each other in passing because you were going to Orlando to see Dan Smith, and didn't work out for us to hang out this time. But as you know, spring break is a busy week at Disney World, and I had a lot of time to stand in line and wrangle my kids and sit by the pool and think. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And then we got back from Disney World, had a great time. And then you and we started this Power Zone Peloton ride. And some of these rides are long. I mean, normally if I do a Peloton ride, I'm looking at 20, 30 minutes, knock it out, get it done. But these rides are 45 minutes. And the one that I did on Sunday was an hour long.
That's the one I'm getting ready to do this afternoon when we get out of here. But I'm going to do the other option because that gentleman is well known to me.
Yeah. So, I've had a lot of time to sit around and think over the past week with it being spring break and, homework's died down for a little while. And I started thinking about the insurance industry and a lot of stuff that people were talking about with the hard market, the focus on technology, M&A activity. And it seems like ever since COVID started, it was those things. Focus on technology. Every single day you're hearing about another M&A deal. And then and now it's the hard market. And so what we have done to deal with the hard market is try to use some of this stuff to get better at improving the client's risk profile. And to your point earlier, I mean, I think there's a ton of stuff that's really cool out there that people are doing. But for us, what we looked at is how can we manage our claims better? And I know we both actively manage our claims, and you work with, Zinjuries to do that. I have a lady in-house that manages claims. But we started thinking like, hey, we really need to manage these work comp claims. It's going to help our profitability. It's going to help people get back to work. And it's going to be the next thing in the step of just saying, hey, recover at work, return to work program. That's great. But if we're out here making the phone calls, calling the adjusters, making sure they're doing their job, making sure the client's in the loop on the whole deal, we thought that's something that's going to improve the risk profile of our clients. We also just started participating in something brand new that Keystone, the group that we're part of, has, which is a hotline for DOT, for safety, for OSHA, and for HR. Because in the past, people have had to pay for all these services. Well, now we subscribe. And so all of our clients are going to have access to all this stuff. So they want to know, well, hey, I don't have the right number of power units on my safer. I don't have the right, mileage on there. They can make a quick phone call and they can get some help for that kind of thing.
Oh, hold on a second, Josh, wait a minute. You mean to tell me you're investing in your accounts to make them better?
Absolutely. And one thing that we said before we started rolling is I'm waiting on a proposal to come in for somebody that we did this for. Somebody that had a DOT score. And for those of you that are listening that don't know, the DOT scores go from 0 to 100. It's not like school. If you're in the 90s, that's really bad. And we have a client that was at a 93 when we took their account over by agent of record a year ago. And then in 1 year through enrolling in our program, they have gone from a 93 down to a 46. And I like stuff that's pretty easy. These reports are, there's a lot of information on them, but at the very top, there's a light pole, and it just says, red, yellow, green. And if it's in the red, that's a mandatory inspect. Yellow's kind of a maybe, and then green, hey, you're good to go. And so they went from a red all the way down to a green. And in a market where it's getting more and more difficult, we believe that they're going to be delivered actually a rate decrease because their compliance factor has gone up. And so I think when everybody else, and we kind of decided last year, like, look, we're going to focus 100% on the clients. And I think while everybody else, or a lot of other people were focused on making this 5 minutes more efficient, or 2 keystrokes more efficient, or automating this email or automating that email, we said, let's figure out how to do that and where it's not me doing everything, right? Where it's not me answering every single question, but let's do it in such a way that it's going to help somebody improve their risk profile, which ultimately will help them defeat the hard market. I'll give you a good example. These insurance companies, I've had several of them, they'll come and they'll say, hey, our rate goal is 8% for the year. Well, that doesn't mean that every middle market account is going to get an 8% rate increase. It means that some of them are going to get 0, some are going to get 2, some are going to get 8, and then some are going to get 20. So how can we be a part of the group and make our clients part of the group that if they say, hey, our goal is 8, then maybe our clients are only getting 3. And that's the way that we're trying to navigate this thing, is by saying, look, we know that you're not going to give 8 across the board. Some are going to have more, some are going to have less. What do we have to do to put our clients in the bucket that are going to have less than what everybody else is doing? And I think that by implementing some of this stuff that we've been doing, it has really proven in a lot of the renewals that we're having. And two, there's still a lot of opportunity out there in work comp. I mean, you're in Florida, you have state mandated rates. They filed for a rate decrease in Florida again for 2024, right? The rates went down, and there's still a lot of opportunity out there. So how do we get our submission at the top of the stack? And I think that's really been the name of the game, to focus on that, because at the end of the day, I think if the clients are not very marketable, I don't think they're really going to care if you have a slick email system or you have a text automated system, because they're sitting here going, wait a minute, there's an 8% rate out here that this carrier is trying to get, and I'm getting 15. What's going on with that? And so instead of going that route, we said, hey, we're going to go a little bit different route and using some of these resources we have.
I'll tell you what, man, I think a couple of things. Number one, you just said a lot. So I'm going to go way back and I'm going to tell you it's amazing how when you take time to decompress and go view the world through your kids' eyes at Disney, how much it gets your priorities in line. It forces you to get back to the basics, whether it's in your personal life or in your work life or whatever else. So kudos to you for taking the time to go do that, because a lot of people listening to this podcast probably don't. And, you know, that's not a belief structure that I certainly don't subscribe to that. But, you know, I think that a lot of times we get caught up in people out there that are giving you the message that you need to work harder than everybody else and put more time in than everybody else. And the reality is, no, you don't. You just need to know how to work smart, and you need to work smart on the things that you know you can control and that you're really, really good at. And that's kind of, you know, where I was headed with with the podcast today is you getting back to the basics. And I don't think there's any way to get back to the basics quicker than just trying to look through the world in your children's eyes. But the other thing is, you're right on the insurance marketability piece. And I think everybody's talking about the hard market and they're griping and moaning about their remarkets, reshops, renewals, whatever you want to call them. Like that's a plague. Well, thank God. I mean, if you don't want to do them, feel free to send them my way. I'll remarket them for you and take that off your plate. But this is a great time to have the conversations that people might not have been willing to have in the last several years when the market wasn't as hard. You're not going to get an account that's a dog today and be able to work a miracle this year. It's just not going to happen, right? You can't take an account that has a less than stellar risk profile and go negotiate that rate decrease or, you know, get better than trend with any of the carriers. What you can do is you can explain to them what they could have been doing all along to not have to deal with what they're dealing with now, and how you have the ability to make sure this doesn't happen to them moving forward. And I think that's where a lot of people miss out. You know, the hard market is nothing I'm ever going to complain about, man. I mean, we've had at least a 20 to 25% organic lift on revenue growth just from renewal. And those are for the accounts we're doing well. I mean, we have carriers hitting us with auto increases here in Florida that it's not a matter of whether or not you're going to get a rate decrease. It's whether or not you're going to get a renewal quote from them. So 25% is about as good as you're going to get on some of this stuff. We're dealing with an epidemic with plumbers right now where people are not wanting to write plumbers due to claims and the exposure from water damage and everything else. And I feel like there's just so many of the people that we compete with and we see on the streets that are not seeing past the premium and getting to the point where they're looking at what's really driving this stuff. And I mean, one of the big ones, and this is something that I formalized and put in as a program with an educational, learning management tract and educational resources for clients, but it goes back to quality control. You know, I mean, I don't know how many people out there write plumbers right now that don't even ask them if they have a formalized quality control program, let alone talk to them about why it's important and, if needed, help them implement that. But I mean, that's the way we need to be thinking. Not every risk that's going to come to you is pristine. And in fact, the pristine risks, maybe they will, maybe they won't. I mean, I've seen quite a few that have been really nice opportunities that are still out shopping, and it looks like the agent's pretty much doing what they need to do on the account. But then we're seeing those ones that have always sort of teetered on the fence. They didn't believe in investing in risk management. They didn't believe in loss control. They didn't believe in, pre-injury management and having everything in place so that when that claim does happen, everybody knows their role and responsibility. And I mean, when I think about getting back to the basics, those are the things I'm looking at. That's where we're doubling down, man. Like I have literally doubled down as an agency by bringing in a full-time risk management practice leader who can go out and put all that stuff in. And, we do outsource the workers' comp claims handling to Zenjuries, but the reason we do that is they're experts at it. our loss ratio on our book dictates that's the right business decision. And the reality is it's less money for me to do that than it is for me to hire a body who's likely less qualified to do the same thing. And so I think, for me, getting back to the basics is looking at those tasks that we're having to do over and over again and say, what do I need to do? What can I delegate and what can I outsource? And I mean, it's really that simple. And Zentries is a great example of something that I outsource. Why? Because number one, I don't like doing it. Number two, I don't have the time to do it. It's not an effective use of my time when I can hire somebody to do it for a fraction of the cost that does a better job. Like that's just common sense to me.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's why we did the same thing with the hotline. I have somebody in my office that has the capacity to do the claims, but I don't have the capacity to learn, every single DOT regulation. I don't have the capacity to become OSHA certified or be able to go perform a mock OSHA audit for somebody. And so if we can have a way for people to make those kind of phone calls, and get the information they need, I think it's definitely a win-win, because then I don't feel the pressure to have to do all that research myself. And I think the point that you've made about having your full-time, risk manager, I mean, I feel like what she has done, and I made some notes, by the way, is she's helped you connect a lot of the dots, right? And say, you've
Well,
got all this stuff
it's an
out here.
adoption. Yeah, the thing is too, it's an adoption rate thing, right? So we've always had a lot of these programs, but if it's going to fall on me to make sure that they're implemented, which is where a lot of it falls, or the producer, it's just not going to happen. I mean, it'll happen on paper, which is where I think a lot of the people in our industry are, where, oh yeah, we got that program in place. Here it is, and we'll make it a part of the submission. Well, that doesn't always cut mustard, man. So, having Abby to be able to be the person who's, I mean, and she is legitimately a bulldog. She's a very nice and polite bulldog, but I can tell you the adoption rate is there. So when we have an account that looks like it slipped a little bit, or one where we know we've had this deficiency and we need to get ahead of it before something really bad happens, trust me, man, it is like the greatest feeling of peace I could possibly have to say, Abby, I need you to go call this person and make sure this happens. Get them enrolled in this program, and I want you to let me know when it's done and what you need from me along the way, and I don't have to deal with it anymore. So now it's not as much about just representing it at the point of sale. It's actually getting it in place. And it's not like we were completely ignoring this stuff, but if I'm being honest, probably 50% maybe of the people actually would do the things we asked them to do and told them they needed to do. And there would come a point where I'd just be like, you know what, screw it. I'm not going to spend any more time on this. If this person doesn't care about their business more than I do, what am I doing? Now I'm not giving them that option. I've got somebody that's a dedicated full-time resource to make sure that stuff gets done. And the evidence is almost immediate. Number one, you see that the culture in the company changes, but you also start seeing that there's reductions in frequency across the book, reductions in severity across the book, and that's going to be a predictor for future mod decreases.
Yeah, so I was listening to, I've got all my, my social media. I don't know if what my algorithm is, but I get nothing but sales advice on my social media algorithms these days. But I was listening to a guy talk named Michael Burt, ex basketball coach, I guess, and he's doing some training now. And I loved what this guy said. He said amateurs listen to their feelings. Amateurs will find any excuse in the world to not prospect. I mean, it's 3:00 in the afternoon. The eclipse is happening right now, and there's people that are saying, "Hey, I'm not going to prospect because I'm going to watch the eclipse." Or people say, "Oh, well, the big game was last night, and I stayed up too late, so I'm not going to watch. I'm not going to prospect today."
But then
right?
there are other people who went out months ago that had the foresight to have branded eclipse glasses made for their product or their agency, and they're going around these parking lots handing them out to everybody.
That's right. That's right. But professionals, they don't rely on their feelings. They don't rely on if they're happy or sad or whatever. They just go out there and they do the job. They prospect an hour, 2 hours a day. They're going to make their 130 touches a week, and they're going to put in the reps every single day. And what I have found in my career, and for me, today the reps look different than they used to look. There was a time when the reps for me were just picking up the phone 100 times a week and making calls and making calls and making calls. But I did something last year that was one of the best things I've ever done that generated a ton of revenue for us just through people telling their friends about it. Is we were we were off at a trade show and we could talk for an hour about trade shows, but I put on a dinner and I rented out a private room on the top floor of the JW Marriott in Nashville, and we had people, coming in and smoke bourbon drinks and the whole deal for everybody, and it was about 20 people in the room, but of the people that were in the room, it was a significant amount of revenue for our agency, but there were also some people there that were not our clients, and there were some people there that didn't get to go that were not our clients that probably are going to want to be there in the future. And so for me, that's a great example of a prospecting technique that I wouldn't have been able to use, 9 years ago. But the point is whether you can go do that or whether you're still picking up the phone 100 times a week, is that we have to continue to put in the reps. Because I don't know about you, but I have hundreds of logins to websites. I have all this stuff that says go on the app or go here or go there. And to me, there's just something about, getting face to face with people, doing this thing in person, the old school way. And I've had people tell me like, why did you drive to this meeting? This was an hour and a half away from your office. And I've had people tell me, I had somebody last week, I was talking to him about this DOT stuff. And he's like, but this is for your clients. Why are you giving me access to this? And I was like, I'm giving you access to this because I believe in our process so much that maybe not this month, maybe not next month, maybe not this year, but at some point in time, you're going to buy into this and you're going to think about me and you're going to say, you know what, this is the person that did this for us. And this is who we want to work with as our insurance broker. We closed 2 weeks ago the longest prospect tail of my career. 9 years in the making.
Love it.
9 years in the making. And this was somebody that, we had been calling on since 2015, but we had done it professionally, like every, 3 to 6 months for 9 years. And then there was an event, there was an issue, something happens. And then the first phone call that gets made was to us. And to me, that is just like the basics of sales, is be professionally persistent over time.
Well, it's like Eric Rich talked about at Emerging Leaders last year in New Orleans when he said, I just want to be the guy that's on deck. If you're not going to hire me now, I understand you've got the relationship and it's long standing. His point was, I don't want to ruin a future opportunity by trying to force myself into a situation where I'm not going to do anything but damage. He said, I'm okay being the first guy on deck if that's where I need to be.
Yeah, and I think you do it in such a way where it's not, like I feel like a lot of times when people will make a cold call or they'll stop in on somebody, they'll just say, well, hey, I'm not here to break up a relationship. I just want to, say hey to you or whatever. I think that it's like, no, I want to be the relationship. I want to be the one that handles this for you. And until you tell me just to go away or block my phone number, I'm going to be professionally persistent over time.
Well, I think that was what the sentiment was that he had, though, when he made that comment. He wanted to be the on deck person, but being the on deck person also means that comes with some regular communication. Hey, look, I know you're not ready to move right now, but I also know that Bob's going to retire in 2 years. I'd love to have lunch with you once a quarter. Is that too much to ask? Do that. Go build the relationship. You're getting everybody else fired before they ever have a chance to come in when Bob's finally ready to sunset or move on. And guess what? When people are getting near the end of their career or people are, start to get complacent, they get sloppy. Bob may get replaced before Bob's ready to get replaced. But to your point, I think we're saying the same thing. you need to be able to professionally follow up with people, even though you're being softly, in most cases, rejected for the time being, because at some point there's something's going to happen. Bob ain't going to be there because he's on the golf course or bending elbows on the 19th hole. And you're going to be the person they call because you're the first person they think of because of how you've conducted yourself and the fact that you've been persistent. And I also don't think there's anything wrong with pointing out how persistent you've been at some point, right? Because at some point in that process, they talk to you more a year than they do the incumbent.
Oh yeah, and I mean I think good example would be, wrote an account 3 years ago that we had been calling on for 4 years prior to that. And then about a year after we worked on this client, somebody else calls us up on the phone, and we wrote the account. It was over $500,000 in premium, and it took 2 weeks. But what I tell people is, no, that account that took 2 weeks, it really took about 7 years, because it took 5 years to get the one company to trust us. It took us serving them for 2 years and doing a really good job. And then their friend says, hey, I've got this insurance problem. And then we're the first phone call that they make, because they say, hey, well, we should call the people that work with us. I mean, they called on us for a long time. They came in, they backed up what they did. And then again, 2 weeks later, we have a new client. But I think that's in today's world of like instant gratification.
Dude, it's
And
exactly what I was getting ready to say. You bring a younger, newer producer. Younger is probably not the best term because you could be older and newer, but I think specifically with the younger, newer producers, they think that middle market prospecting and sales is like quote bind issue, man. It's like we just think that it should fall into our lap, and it's easy to walk into an established agency that's got a few $1,000,000 in revenue and just think that just happened. Like they weren't there for all the practice and the training and the getting beat up and the in the sparring. And to me, I think that what we do translates really, really well. I don't want to go all Alan Stein Jr. on anybody, but I think it translates really well to the basketball world. We went to the Magic game last night, took Ethan to his first NBA game. And so again, I got to experience something through my kids' eyes, which always makes me think different and open my mind. But I was watching these guys and I'm just thinking to myself how much work they put in to get there, right? And I think back to me, even when I played basketball in high school, there were a few things you knew you needed to do every day. You were going to run a certain number of suicides every day after practice, and you needed to do it in the right time. And guess what? If everybody on the team didn't get it done in time, the whole team ran them again until everybody got it done in under the time limit, or were puking in buckets over on the side of the gym. The other thing, we had to shoot 100 free throws every single day to make sure that we had our technique and the muscle memory right to shoot free throws. And I look at it, and I'm not going to name names, but Ethan is involved with a Division II, I believe, university's basketball program. And one of the things that I noticed when I talked to Annie about it was they don't make their free throws, man. Like, how do you miss the free throws? But then you go to the NBA game last night and it's like money. Every single person, they've got those bang sticks, they're chanting, everything else. Everything's blocked out and the ball goes in because they put the work in and shot 100, 200, 300 free throws every single day to make sure that happens. And I see too many young people that come into this industry that think they're God's gift to insurance without ever proving themselves, ever running the suicides, ever doing the free throw shooting, but somehow think they deserve a six-figure salary and equity in your agency. They haven't put the first damn bit of work in yet. Well, you have one good year. That makes you Wham. That makes you Aha, the groups of the 80s, one-hit wonders, flock of seagulls. You're the flock of seagulls of the insurance industry if that's your thought process. That's not who you want to be. You want to be Elton John. You want to be these people that come in and Billy Joel year after year after year, just put out record after record after record. And they get the sales because they put in the time. Not every record they had was great. But guess what? Not every presentation we make is great either. But we win way more than we lose because what? We put in the reps. That's how it works.
I consider myself, and I try to talk about this a lot whenever I talk to people, or if a producer wants to ask me a question about my career. But I try to talk about this a lot, that like anything that we've created or that I've created as a producer is 100% due to the fact that I was surrounding myself with a lot of really smart people, and I sought out a lot of really smart people. And if and I won't go through it again here, but the prospect qualification, that process that we talk about. I went to the very first sales class I went to was called The Great Escape, and it was about escaping mediocrity, not being a C player. And it was a Scott Addis event. We talked about this numerous of times, and Scott's been, he's probably been doing this longer than I've been alive, and I turned 40 this year, right? He's been in the game
And
forever,
still going, by the way.
and still going. But he sat there and walked through this process that was an easy 4-step process. And I was sitting there, and I thought to myself, because in my head, when I first started, I was like, oh my gosh, you have all these ABC houses, and you have all these big brokers, and how are we ever going to compete? And they have every market, and we don't have every market. And they got all the stuff and all the risk management, and we don't have any of that stuff. And Scott said, look, I'm going to give you a 4-step process. And he gives this 4-step process, and he says, like, hey, look, I'm going to help you qualify your prospects, and we're going to ask them 4 questions. It's going to be really easy. And I took one of his questions out, and I added one of my own, and I've been doing the same thing for 9 years. But what people don't know is that, and I'm willing to admit this, is on hour-long car rides to prospects, I bet you I have said the prospect qualification method to my rear view mirror more times than I have said it to human beings. Because that's how much I practiced it. It was like my free throws. And I wrote this down because I thought this was good. So, and feel free to stop me at any time, because you know a lot of this about me, but some other people don't. So my first sales coach was a guy named Gil Simons. And I started working with Gil not too long after I went to Scott's class. And Gil unfortunately passed away during COVID, but Gil taught me accountability, extreme accountability. I'll never forget it. This was before our days of HubSpot or any kind of CRM, but we had a spreadsheet. And the name of his spreadsheet was called the A per day planner. And he would have sales activity goals, and he would say, look, we're not going to focus on the outcome, or if we're going to focus on the process. And that's what all these great athletes do. They focus on the process, and they try to detach themselves from the outcome. And so his A per day for a commercial producer was, I want you to get 3 appointments a week with your ideal prospect, who is a name you can write on the back of a 3x5 index card. And if you come to me every month in our sales meeting, and you have made 3 qualified, legitimate meetings a week with your ideal prospects, then that's your A. You pass, right? It's not about, ultimately you do have to sell stuff, but like, it's not necessarily in the early days about how much you sell, but it's about, are you working through the process? And so I worked with Gil for a number of years. And then, we had him or you had him on the podcast, and I was able to be here, but Robert Sutter, I mean, I can look at Robert, and Robert taught me extreme professionalism, because one of the things that he would always tell me is like, hey, you're a little bit rough around the edges. You probably need to clean some of this stuff up in some of your presentations. You got to turn the South Georgia off a little bit. But he was right. He was right. And he taught me about being a chameleon, not a fake person, but he taught me how to read the room. He taught me how to look at the person that was sitting across from me and pay attention to their mannerisms and pay attention to what they're interested in. And are they a driver? Do they want this to be a quick meeting? Are they a scientist type personality where they want to know about every little detail? Are they extreme relationship type person? And then within relationships, he taught me, do they ask more questions of you, or do they tell more stories of you to you? And then it all depends on how all that goes on how you approach your presentation. And so then I took this little four thing Scott Addis deal, and then I adapted it to all these different personality types. And then I had 4 different ways of saying it, depending on who was sitting in front of me. And then another guy, and you know this guy too, Preston Diamond. Preston Diamond taught me to think big, like way bigger than I ever dreamed of. And I met Preston 9 years ago. And I remember asking Preston, like, how do we compete with the big ABC houses? And he was like, if you just do what I tell you, you're going to win. And then I'm gonna give you some credit. Is when we started hanging out, you say a lot of the things that I say, but you say them in a different way because your mind works differently than mine does. And a lot of the things that I've heard you say, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this because we get at a lot of the same targets. We just, well, a lot of times, frame it a little bit differently. Okay. But it taught me, like in the movie Suits, or the show Suits, what is it that Harvey says? When somebody has a gun to your head, how many choices do you have? And he's like, oh, you got hundreds of choices or thousands of choices or whatever. You probably got it memorized exactly what he says. But you got one problem, and I'm kind of like, oh, I'm like a 2 solution guy. I either got to try to fight this guy and take the gun, or he's just going to shoot me. That's my only 2 choices. And then, but you're a guy that will come and be like, oh, well, there's 37 different outcomes here that you can take. And so I think interacting with you over the past 4 years, which is hard to believe it's been that long, considering that we've been,
or that it's been that short, depending on perspective,
or perspective. But I mean, we've been all over the country from coast to coast, and New York to Key West, and Napa. I mean, everywhere in between, right? I mean, George Strait at the stadium. I mean, we've been all kind of places. And so I don't know. I think you frame it a little bit different than I do because you think different than I do. But like when you look back and you see all these relationships, I mean, I mostly look back as grateful. And how lucky did I get, to be able to meet all these people. And I can sit here.
You did it the hard way too, man. I mean, I think one of the things is that, and this is one of the things that really, really does drive me nuts more than anything else. I wish podcasts existed when I first got in the industry. I wish YouTube channels were there. I wish people were more collaborative and free for sharing how they think so that I could absorb all that. It just didn't happen. You had to wait until the Scott Addises came around and did something for the Big I or PIA or whatever, or you went to CIC. So you were kind of in between where I started and where we are today. And that just started happening. But what I will never understand is how you can be a producer and have almost unlimited tools available to you and not take advantage of those when they don't cost you a dime. There are people out there. I get on this podcast literally every single time I record, and I share exactly what I do and what allows me to win. And I have people who come on and do the same, and we get a great number of downloads. We're thankful for everybody who listens, but there are so many people who don't even bother to listen. And it's free and it's good information. It's like, I don't want to brag, but it's made me very wealthy, and I'm the type of person that if somebody else already drew the map, I'm going to follow it. I may take the side road here or there because I'm going to get there in a different way. But ultimately, to your point, Addis gave you a great framework. I don't know that. I mean, you and I had never even talked about that before until the first time, obviously, that we had the conversation. And you're right. I say it a little differently, but we were 100% doing the same thing. I don't know why the people who are out there that are struggling, like if you're writing 500,000 in revenue a year, don't listen to me. Like, you don't need to hear what I have to say, but if you're out there writing 60, 70, 80,000 in revenue, beating your chest, like you're something special, you got a lot to learn, young buck.
Well, I read something this morning, and I'm gonna change the subject after this, okay? But I want to talk about these 5 things, not one at a time, but I just think this is good. And this was the same guy that I've been reading a lot of, Michael Burt, and he said, these are 5 things that top salespeople have. And I love this first one, remarkable boldness. And when I
Well,
think
and
about,
even Scott Howe talked about this, except we called it audacity in that conversation.
and you know who I'm going to say, my business partner, Andrew, has remarkable boldness. I mean, I won't tell, I'll let everybody go find when I told the story about him knocking on the Volvo C70 convertible window. But that's remarkable boldness.
I
You know,
think I would add something to that, though. Remarkably likable boldness.
oh, well, that's coming up next. Don't worry. So he's got this remarkable boldness, and he's willing to do stuff that other people aren't willing to do, because number two, he's intrinsically motivated. He's motivated by something that just like comes on the inside. And then this is number three, and this is what Andrew's got a skill at like almost nobody I've ever met, especially one-on-one. And this is something that all good people have, because all the people that I talked about have this. You have this. I mean, a lot of people that we know have this. Scott Howell has this, but the ability to make a personal connection. And people do it in all different kind of ways, but the ability to make a personal connection. Number four, resilience is, you got 2 presentations in one day. One doesn't go so good. The first one doesn't go so good. Can you get back up from that first one and then go to the second one? And then number 5 is the ability to close, right? Can you ask for the order? So I don't know what you think about these, but to me, these are 5 basic things: remarkable boldness, intrinsic motivation, personal connections, resilience, and the ability to finish.
No, I mean, I agree completely. I mean, I was laughing when you said the ability to close, because I mean, to me, I go back to like one of the first few appointments I was ever I was ever on for a larger account. It was a restaurant chain that's well known. Um, and I'm sitting there, and there's all these people that we paraded in to show everybody how great we were. And all they're doing is sitting there talking about how great we are. And I'm thinking, there's not a single person in here asking for the order. So the youngest dude, the most inexperienced in the room, basically steps up and say, what's it going to take for us to move forward? And the CFO said, I'm ready to go. I'm basically ready to go. And this was a time when we would sit out in the car in the parking lot right after the meeting, and we would criticize ourselves, good, bad, and otherwise, so that we could make notes and know what we needed to do and improve before we forgot that stuff. And here I am with people who had decades of industry experience. And they're like, well, what did you take out of that meeting? I'm like, what I took out of that meeting was, you need to quit talking about yourself so much and ask for the order. Sometimes you just have to ask for the flipping order, and that's all it takes. And I mean, that's a simplistic way to look at it. How you ask for the order is probably a little bit more complex, and how you set yourself up to be in a position to ask for it. But at the end of the day, I really think that 50% of closing is just asking somebody for the business, period. And it's
Yeah.
amazing as I sit in the room with people who are newer producers, or I talk to people who are having issues getting business across the finish line, they just don't even bother to ask for the order.
Yeah. I mean, if you go into a meet, and you're right. I mean, because we both talk about this is, hey, I'm not going to ask you to marry me on the first date, but there is a time coming when I am going to ask you to get married. And it's typically about, the third or the fourth meeting. And that's when it's going to happen. I was competing on an account a number of years ago. And this was against a publicly traded company, broker. And they brought like, I think 6 people to the meeting. They all had suits on. They came in with 168-page proposal, where about 167 pages was about them. And they took 3 hours of time. And then we came in right after that. And I was pretty smart, because the CFO, who we had built a good personal connection with, sent a text and said, hey, look, this thing is dragging on and on and on and on. The last thing that the CEO is going to want is for you to drag this on for 3 hours. So Andrew and I were working on this deal together. We're sitting down in South Georgia somewhere at some restaurant waiting on our turn. And we go in, we say, hey, here's an idea. Let's take all this stuff on our proposal and let's put it on one page, one legal page, the big ones. So that's what we did. We went and put it on one legal page. We took it to the local print shop 10 minutes before this proposal, and we bring the thing in there. And the first thing the CEO said is, thank goodness this is not 168 pages long. And I said, well, it was probably 167 pages of shit that don't matter and one page of stuff that did. And so we bring this one pager in there, and it was like getting to the end of it. Does that sound pretty simple? Pretty easy enough? And then boom, ask for the order, and we have it. Now, look, the ability to have the boldness to ask the question, the personal connection with the person, to be able to get them to feel comfortable with you, right? That's all this long tail skill. But at the end of the day, it was really just, hey, here's what you got to do. You go in, you do that, you ask for the order, and you get the order. And so I just think that, like, there's a ton of good stuff out there. But for me, at least in 2023 and so far in 2024, it has just been going back to the stuff that got me here. And, unless you got anything else to say, I mean, changing gears, when I came on your podcast the very first time, I was the most fit I'd ever been in my entire adult life. And now, turning 40 years old, maybe I'm like getting close to a midlife crisis or whatever. I am not the most fit I've ever been in my entire adult life, right now. And we talk about this all the time, but getting back to the basics is more than just this sales stuff that you talked about at the very beginning, but it's more than all this sales stuff that we're talking about. We have both had the opportunity to make tremendous relationships and friendships in this business. And the thing that I love about, our friendship, and I'm sure everybody knows this, but I wasn't exaggerating when I say we've been all over the country. You and I, we talk every single day. Our wives talk every single day. I mean, we got a Facebook thread. I mean, it's just been so cool I think for us to become friends, and the wives and the kids have met, and that's just such a amazing thing that this business has done for us. But I think more than all the business stuff, that what I have learned as our agency has grown, or as my book has grown, or whatever, when I started out, I wasn't thinking this way, is that the most important things that I have are in Perry, Georgia, right? And for me, a few years ago, I realized, and look, I grew up, had a great family. I talk about that all the time. But we were so busy, like, I think a lot of times doing the next thing, going to the next practice, going to the next, event. I don't remember as a kid really stopping and smelling the roses that much. And I don't think, I can't really remember a ton of beach trips or, different things like that, because I was always going. It wasn't like anybody was depriving me of that. I mean, for sure. But I think that, like, for me, with this unique opportunity that I've had is, and I went to my doctor a couple years ago, and I love Miss Lomboy, and she was like, Josh, you have to break away from this. You have to break away from this. You cannot make your life all about work. You cannot make your life all about all these things. You tell me all these things. You have 11 employees. I have 15. Get over it. I'm like, okay, yes, ma'am. And she says, here's what I'm going to prescribe for you. She's like, I'm going to prescribe for you to go do 2 trips a year with just you and your wife at least, and 2 trips a year with your family, the kids and everything. And so for the past 3 years, that's exactly what it is that I've been doing. And I took a picture and I sent it to you, and you're such a wordsmith. I was like, Dave could write a real banger on this picture. But it was a picture of us at Epcot,
Yeah,
and
with James looking at the fireworks.
with James looking at the fireworks. And I thought to myself, there is no deal, anything that I have written down to talk about sales that tops that for me. And some of the stuff that we do in the agency allows that to happen, those moments to happen. But nothing is better than that. I mean, nothing's better than taking Ethan to his first basketball game. It's the best ever. And if I could encourage people to do one thing, is that they could realize that this stuff is important, but it is not the most important thing ever. And I just hope that as people, if you're starting your agency, then go for it, but don't lose sight of the things that are the most important. It's not worth losing everything to get one thing.
No, I agree, man. And I mean, it's the same thing. My hook when I go in and I meet with a prospect is to go through what our value prop is from the risk management side and whatever else. And I always say, yeah, insurance is fine. And we certainly want to be able to place that. In fact, we view the insurance as the funding mechanism for you to be able to purchase what we talked about in terms of all these services that you're not getting. We're showing you how to take money you're already spending to get something you don't have. I view my business as the funding mechanism for me to live my life the right way.
Mm.
And I think we get lost in that. And again, I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of eyes on them in our industry right now that think that you're nuts if you live a balanced life. I think they're nuts that they don't, period. And you're never going to win me over on that. I've always said that when my mind, my mental health, my physical health, and my spiritual health are in perfect balance, I have the best performance, period. And I tend to invest in all three of those. I have the best performance as a husband, the best performance as a father, and the best performance as a business person. I can't have any portion of my life that's getting more attention than the other, because when that happens, the others suffer. And I don't know of any argument that's going to make me believe otherwise, because I know I have 4 kids that hopefully when the day comes that they have their own families, they can draw off the experiences I've been able to provide for them and do even better. If that happens, I won.
And especially, I wrote this in the forward of your book. It's like when you have a little girl, I mean, that really changes everything as a dad. And when that little girl looks up at you and says, "I love you, Daddy," and that little girl says, "Are you going to be at my pageant, or are you going to be at my whatever?"
The answer is there's only one answer. It's always yes.
Every single time. And it doesn't matter if you miss a deal, or you miss a meeting, or you miss a this, or you lose whatever. It just doesn't matter, because this is so much more. Is so much more important. And there's a lot of people out there that will say, "David, well, this is really easy for you to say." And there may be some people that would say, "Well, Josh, this is kind of easy for you to say, this far into it." But I can tell you that competitive spirit that you have, and that I have, and that so many people have, that just doesn't die down. But for me, I've had to redirect it. I've had to redirect it and to say, I am going to compete fiercely for spending time with my family. And to me, like, that drive is like nothing else. I mean, if it's like, "Oh, well, we need a new basketball goal," I have it there this afternoon. "Oh, well, James needs some, he's gotten 2 inches taller. He needs some new golf clubs." Have it there. Kellyanne needs a new gymnastics shoe. Let's do it. I mean, it just doesn't matter, and it's funny, the things that kids remember. We went to the hibachi place at Disney, and it was James's first time using chopsticks. and they bring the chopsticks out, and he was like fiddling with them, and then they brought out the kind that had the rubber band on it and the wrapper tied up, and he sat there and he ate with these chopsticks. And when we got back, the first thing he asked for was, he was like, "Hey, Dad, where are the chopsticks?" He was a big deal. Like, we better bring those things home. And he was like, "I want to try and eat with my chopsticks." And it's like, for me, I don't know. I've been at hibachi, 100 times. I mean,
At
but
this
for
point,
him,
you have, but when you were a kid, how many times had you been to hibachi? That was like a
and that
massive treat, man.
that was a big thing. And they made the little steam thing come out of the little Disney characters that they made out of the onions. I mean, it was just, but for them, it was just this amazing thing. And I hope that one day when they look back on their dad, they won't say, "Well, my dad had a business." I hope they look back and say, "I'll never forget the time that I used chopsticks for the first time with my dad." So, um, for me, and look, I don't know why I reached out to you and said, "Hey, I want to have this conversation," but for me, it's all that. And
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why is because we're facing the same thing right now. And so is everybody listening to this. We're facing the hardest market that likely most of us have ever seen. And I think that this is the time that we're going to be the most tempted to forsake the things that are the most important in chase of the dollar, or in chase of winning, or whatever your motivation is. And there's going to be a bunch of people out there right now shaking their head saying, you got it all wrong. Well, you know what? I sleep really, really well at night. My family doesn't go without anything. I could always make more money. I could always sell another deal, but time can't be bought. And I prefer to invest in the assets that are the most valuable. And that's my kids' lives at this point. Grayson said something to me one day, and I'll never forget it. He said, "Dad," he goes, "you don't need to leave me anything. I'd rather you invest your money now." It's what we
that's
do.
where it's at, man. I mean, I'll leave you with one thing, and we can get out of here. I say this a lot, but I mean it. Look, there's only a couple things that you can't delegate or automate, and it's your relationship that you have with your wife, the relationship that you have with your kids, and those are two things that are too important. And I hope, in my hope for people, that in this world that they're in, that surely for their whole life that goodness and mercy will follow them for wherever they go. And I hope that for everybody that's listening. Thank you for giving me the platform. This has been unbelievable.
And to think I had to beg you to come on the first time. I'll never forget that, man. We were just launching too. You had to have been inside the first 10 or 15 episodes we ever did. And I sent you that thing on Messenger, and I'm like, this guy thinks a lot like I do. I need to get him on. People need to hear what this guy has to say. And you were like, let me think about it. I'll get back to you. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Think about it and get back to me. Thank God you did, man. It's been a wild ride since, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. So I
No
appreciate you
chance.
taking time to come on. I know everybody listening appreciates all the times you've been on and all the wisdom you've shared. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep getting back to the basics. I mean, it's a crazy. The last couple of years I've been on the road so much, and here I am doing the same things day in and day out, just coming to work and being in the agency, and I'm probably the happiest I've been in a long time, and you see an immediate result. So it's easy to get perspective out of whack. And the one thing I would say is my family life, my relationship with Andrea, none of that's ever suffered because I've traveled, because I've always been present, period. No matter what happened, I was always present. What suffered is my own well-being and my own physical health. And that has become my, probably, if I were to say, the thing that's gone up the priority list the most in 2024, that's it. And I feel like I've gotten the other stuff right for the most part. Annie and I intentionally get away every quarter, for a long weekend. Um, we've already planned out, as we planned out all of our summer trips with the kids. probably doing more than we should. But, again, if I died tomorrow, I want to make sure I did everything I could. But, my physical health suffered. And I think, I hear it a lot, and look, I'm in a lot of people's faces because now I'm pushing myself and I need people for accountability. And I have other friends that I've grown and to care about quite a bit. And I'm concerned because I don't see that same focus. And I don't want them to fall into the same mistakes that I fell into for a number of years. And it's always, well, let me wait till the first of the month, or let me wait for this to happen, or wait for that to happen. We're not promised tomorrow. Tomorrow, it may never come. So, to your point about having a little girl, ain't nobody else walking Caroline down the aisle, man. It just isn't going to happen. I'm not going to let that happen. Or, God forbid, if I'm not able to do it, it's not because I made temporary choices that were poor for my long-term well-being. And so we owe it to our families to be the best version of ourselves across the board. And I think, we've hammered that point home, if nothing else today. So appreciate you coming on, and everybody else, we'll catch you next time. See ya.